Greetings and welcome to Choose Wisely. I am your host, Armin Gabrielli. This podcast is Parenting Part 2. If you had seen the first one, I thank you for returning to watch Part 2. If you haven't seen the first one, Part 1, then I invite you to do so. I believe that there may be some healthy nuggets, and I'm kind of doing these podcasts in sequential order. So the first one sort of acts as a prelude to this one. Now, in the first one, I discussed a couple of things, becoming aware of where we can be better parents for those who are doing pretty okay. And then we have those who really made some significant mistakes. And also going to appeal to those who aren't doing well at all, who is just parenting from where they are, but have no real understanding of what they're doing, where they're parenting from, and how this is impacting our children. I believe most parents want the best for our kids. Most of us don't know what that is. Even if you think you do, there's a good chance you don't. I can promise you that. Unless you've done some long studying, some researching, some examining inward and outward, look at your children, unless you've studied to see what healthy parenting is and what healthy parenting looks like in terms of outcome and children's responses and how they are growing up, then chances are we're not doing good. Not yesterday, I'm sorry. In the previous podcast, I mentioned a noted psychologist, Gabor Mate, and I said I was going to tell two stories of reels that I've watched him in, and I only mentioned one. This is appropriate for me to mention the second one as it's related to what I was just saying, not knowing the effects that we're having on our children. So in this particular reel, he is talking to an individual. I imagine she may have even been the interviewer. She had just shared that her trauma, he asked what was her most significant trauma as a child. And she said as a child, maybe around 9, 10, or somewhere around there, about 9 or 10, she was molested. And she remembers it. It was significant trauma for her. He asked her how did she feel in that moment, and she remembered. And again, she emphasized that that was truly her first and biggest trauma in her childhood. He then asked her, who did you tell? She said, no one. She said, did you tell your parents, anybody? She said, no, she didn't tell anybody. She didn't. And he asked her why. He said, because she didn't feel like she could. She was afraid of how they was going to respond. Then he said, okay. He asked her if her daughter ever suffered, or any of her children ever suffered molestation, what would she want her children to do? And she said, I would want them to come and tell me immediately. And she said, that's important to you? He said, yes. Then he asked her, what if I told you that that was not your first trauma? And she said, what do you mean? She said, again, he asked her again, you would want your children to come and speak to you, right? She said, yes. He said, but when it happened to you, you did not tell anybody. Why again you didn't tell anybody? She said she didn't feel like she could. He asked, you mean you didn't feel safe? She said, yes. He said, that means you was already living a trauma. Because as children, we should feel safe to be able to go to our parents with anything, especially something so traumatizing, so tragic as being molested or raped. But her first trauma, as he explained, was that the fact that she didn't feel safe enough that she can talk to her parents, tell her mother what happened, meant that she was already living trauma. And I was amazed significantly and thought about what he said and what it meant, the dynamic of that. And I realize it's true because as parents, we want our children to be able to come and tell us anything. And if our children are afraid to come and tell us things, that means we created an environment and where they're not safe. And I thought about that. Now, encourage you to think about it. How comfortable do your children feel coming to you to share certain things with you? How safe do they feel with being able to tell you any and everything, especially something like that? And unfortunately, that was the norm. That was it. It wasn't just a family norm in her family, it's been a society norm. Many grew up knowing that whatever ills or traumas they experienced, they had to keep quiet. They could not share it. They were taught that it was their shame to the point where many who are accosted in many kind of ways, they believe that it was their fault. Some are even told that by parents, that it's their fault. What happened to them? What kind of trauma is that? That's a horrible trauma. What I gathered from that, beyond the obvious, was that unknowingly as parents, we probably are, if not definitely are, doing things that are creating our children to respond and be in places that are not healthy. Our children should always feel safe. Invariably, they don't. That's not a good thing, especially when it comes to situations where children need to tell us things so that we can continue keeping them safe or to safeguard them and prevent things from happening. We don't do that. And that's something on us. That's something that as a parent, we need to examine. What is it that we are doing or not doing? How is it that we are being with our children to where they don't feel safe to even come and tell us these things that need to be told to us? I grew up in New York, but with Caribbean upbringing and had a very strict household and had all these rules and how kids are supposed to be. I mentioned one of the last podcasts, very, very, very famous saying, children should be seen and not heard. And there were so many things about how we are as parents that we continue because we believe that it's correct, it's the right thing and we do it just because that's what we know. That's how we grew up in, having no idea that how we are being, how we are parenting is extremely unhealthy, and that we're just continuing the trauma from generation to generation. We are passing it down. We may verbalize, we want to stop the generational curse. We want to end the traumatic cycle, yet we still do things to continue it. And that's because we just don't know. And that's what we need to do. We need to choose to know. We need to figure out what is it that we're doing right and wrong. What makes that difficult? What makes it difficult for us as parents to be able to self examine and look at how we are as a person, as an individual, and as a parent? It's difficult for us to look at ourselves honestly and to find and learn what it is that we're doing right, what it is that we're doing wrong. It's painful. I know it was and has been for me. As much as my kids will go on and on and on about how good and how much and all this other stuff, use the words great, whatever. I try not to use that word because sometimes I look back and I'm thinking, with all the mistakes I made, no, 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 no. And it was painful. There was times where I would cry inside, where I would sit in my sadness because of what I would learn that I was doing that was wrong. And I had to work through that. I had to get over it. I can't change the past. So what's the point? And they're past that type of parenting. So what's the point? but it was some recognition, some realizing. And in the process, when my children were young, I am so thankful that somehow God blessed me with the ability to combat my ego and quiet my ego and start to learn to listen to my kids, to start becoming better and better and better. And it made a world of difference. With my six, he was 16 at the time, with my middle son and my eldest son, boy, did I learn a lot from them and from my daughter as well. From my eldest son, I learned how things that we do, how they can be traumatic and damaging significantly to our children. My two older boys from a previous marriage, at a point when they were teenagers, they were living with their mother. Mother and I separated, divorced. They were living with their mother in Texas. After moving out of New York, I was here in Georgia with my newer family. And my eldest son, he was flying from New York going to Texas, and he had a layover in Georgia. At the time, my wife and I were dealing with some financial hardships, and he wanted me to meet him at the airport. Money was so tight at that time. Gas prices were skyrocketing that I really didn't have the funds to. I hadn't gotten paid yet, so we were living check to check, and I just didn't have the gas to go visit him. And I didn't think it was going to be anything. I just told him that I won't be able to make it, and that was that. Now this is a young man who probably was the closest to me growing up as a young child, as a young toddler, than the other four were. At the time, 1, 2 years old, I literally took him with me everywhere. I don't think there was a place I went other than work that he didn't come with me. And then when he got old enough, um, and they had spring break or days off for during the summer, he spent a lot of days with me at work too. He and his younger brothers, my second son. But I took him everywhere with me. We did everything together. I was a DJ, and every party practically within the city that I had to set up and carry my equipment to, I just brought him along with me. And he was just there with me. Um, as far as I was concerned, I was just being a dad. Whether his mother was busy or not, he wanted to be around me. So it was nothing for me to carry him with me. I didn't realize what a positive impact that was having on him. And it was, and it made him extremely close to me. He had such respect for me that after his mother and I broke up, and he became a teenager, and he and his mother would have differences. She knew she could call me, and I would always be able to not just get through to him, but be able to mediate between the two of them. He had that much respect and love for me. We were that close. So, of course, the separation, I didn't know at the time, but it was extremely devastating to him. But at some point, I knew that he was traumatized by my absence. And I just figured it was typical uh, feelings of abandonment or that separation from a parent that you were close with, that a child would be close with. I thought it was something simple. And I figured as he gets older and we're able to reconnect, as he gets older, his mother and I weren't getting along at the time, that would be okay and fine. But even as he got of age, I just realized that no, there was something more, something greater. And I learned that he had a significant hole in his heart. And I didn't understand where that was coming from. I really thought it was just a typical, a child product of a broken family, mother, father separated, yada, yada. But when he and I finally talked about it, when he finally opened up and told me what happened and why he had such a big hole in his heart, a hurt that is still affecting him, and I know to this day, is he mentioned that day that he had a layover where I'm at in Atlanta, Georgia. And me not being able to come and spend time with him was that significant moment in trauma that has lasted to this day. I had no idea. I had no idea that something seemingly so simple had such a powerful and painful impact on him. And as much as he and we connect, he's blessed me with my first grandchild. I see the effect still there. I mention that because, again, as a parent, a lot of times we don't know what we're doing and how it affects our children and the trauma that we cause. The trauma, the impact, the hurt, the anger, the whole that sometimes aren't always complete. We just learn to manage life with them. I mentioned my third child because somehow he got through to me. Not sure how, but it was a changing point for me as a parent and definitely for my relationship with all of my children. We were driving home. He was driving at the time. He was 16, recently got his license, so I let him drive for experience to just develop his skill. We were driving and he asked me about something, he wanted to do something. And I said, no. He said, why not? I said, because I said so. That's another famous thing that parents say, because I said so, because I said so, because I said so, as if that's all that matters. Excuse me. So he was trying to encourage me to tell him to explain. I felt, no, I don't have to explain anything to you. And then he said something that made me pause and think. And I said, I'll give it a try. He said, Dad, he said, I understand when I was younger, I didn't understand things. And so you would tell me things and just say, because you said so, because I would have understood anyway. He said, but I'm older now and I'm trying to understand and learn from you. But I can't learn from you if you don't explain things to me. I want that the next time I don't do this particular thing, I don't even have to ask you, can or can I? I will have an understanding as to why not. But if you don't explain to me, I will never understand. I will never know. And I will continue with the same mindset. My goal really, truly is to understand so I can learn and become better and start thinking of this way on my own. So reluctantly, I was like, is he being serious or is he just conning me? So I explained to him. And he said, I actually understand that. And I see your point and I see why you say no or whatever it is I was saying. And he thanked me. He said, thank you. Thank you for explaining to me. And I was in shock. I said, wow. I said, did he really understand? And I was watching him for the next couple of days and he gained this level of respect for me that I'd never seen before. And if I was to describe it, from his point of view, what I believe, and he later confirmed it at the time, but I believe what I was believing is that he was looking at me and seeing that when my father says something or does something, there's a good reason behind it. And it's not just out of authority. And later, he confirmed that's what it was. And what was great is that our relationship changed because I no longer had to chastise him or anything. For the most part, I would just explain, and he would either listen, and he would either understand or listen, or if he didn't understand, it didn't matter. He would listen because he learned that I have reasons for doing certain things, even if he doesn't understand. And then there were times where he had a different perspective of things, and with respect, he would explain his perspective and we would actually have a conversation. And I was no longer talking to a young child. I was talking to a grown child becoming a young adult. And so I realized that I had to look at all my kids differently. And I said, okay, he's at this age. And then I said, wow, you know what? Each of my kids are different ages, different mentalities, and different developments. So I started to parent them differently. I started to parent them where they are, not where I was. I started to see them. I saw my kids and I started to parent them where they were and not where I was. I'm getting a little emotional because that's one of the things that I wish I knew when I had my children from the beginning. I wish I parented them from where they were and not from where I was. I'm sure I would have been able to not just give them a whole lot more, but I would have helped them develop more, quicker, better into who they are meant to be. And so with each child, at least the younger ones, I was able to parent them very differently between each other because they were each different, and I saw that. And there were times where I had to make the greater adjustment than then because I realized that I could not force them to do what they're not capable of doing. I could not get them to understand what they weren't capable of understanding. It reduced my frustration as a parent. It reduced their frustration and the feeling of not meeting our standards or not getting our approval. When the kids said that, oh, especially my youngest one, there was a time he didn't achieve something. I don't remember what it was. And he had an attitude like my wife and I was like, "What's with the attitude? What's with the attitude?" We was curbing his attitude because he was borderline disrespectful. And then eventually he blurted it out. He said he felt like he failed us. He felt like he didn't live up to what we expected him to be. That broke my heart. It made me realize again another mistake that we were making. And as parents, we do that. We parent. I'm gonna say it this way again. We parent from where we are instead of from where our kids are. As parents, we sometimes make little subtle mistakes. And then as parents, sometimes we make big mistakes. And then sometimes as parents, we're horrible. Some of us shouldn't even be parents because of the way we are. I'm trying to keep it light, but there's some people that don't deserve to be parents, that aren't healthy or equipped to be parents. And then there's some that just needs to heal significantly and some that just need to make improvements. But that was a mistake that I was making. And when I, again, in my silent moments would think and introspect, I realized why I was making a lot of the mistakes I was making and why I was parenting from my point of view as opposed to my children's point of view. I didn't see them as who they were and what they were capable of. I saw them as young kids. I saw them as lower, lesser. They don't know. You're not experienced. You don't know. You don't know. A child does not have to know a lot, does not have to have a lot of experience to be able to teach. We all are blessed with a thing called instinct, are blessed with the knowing, and some of us are truly blessed. We're anointed with a God knowing that we don't have to have any experience in the world and we can still choose wisely, do better, know better instinctively. I did not see my children for the God children that they were, for the spiritual beings that they were. As parents, we think about nurturing the psyche, maybe nurturing the emotional, and definitely building a physical, but we forget all about that deep spiritual person that makes them, who they are, and they are different. And I realized the reason why I was making that mistake and why I was parenting the way I was is because I was parenting from ego. And when I examined that and saw what that looks like, I realized that most parents parent from ego. We parent from ego. That's what makes us, it keeps us from being able to hear our children. We don't like to be wrong. Oh my gosh, we do not like to be wrong. We hate to be wrong. That's your ego. That's your ego. You're tripping. You're tripping because you are wrong. We are hypocritical as parents. Oh my God, we are Hypocrites, because we would tell children what to do. Do what I say, but not what I do. Whoa, what is that? That becomes oppression, actually. Do as I say, but not as I do. But yet we say the greatest teacher is experience, or we learn from other people's examples. In other words, you don't want to correct yourself. You don't want to be better. You don't want to do what you tell your children to do, but yet you want them to do it. You don't want to exercise self control and maintain respect, maintain your behavior, but we want our children to do. We want, I don't speak to me that way. Well, how are you speaking to your children? Why you have an attitude? Well, why you have an attitude? Imagine reprimanding a child for a bad attitude while you have a bad attitude. And we do that. In fact, a lot of us resort to harsh punishment because we're impatient. Yeah, well, I was work all day. I had a hard day at work and so forth and so on. I don't have the time and the attention. That's not the child's fault. That's not the child's responsibility. That's yours. You're the one that decided to have a child. You're the one that has to work to take care of me. You're the one that's where you are in terms of what you know to gain the kind of employment you have, adequate or inadequate. That's all on you. Your situation has nothing to do with me. I didn't create it, but yet you're taking it out on me. That's trauma. That's bad. That's unfair. I'm sure none of us as adults, as parents, want anybody to take their frustration, things that they created that they had nothing to do with, that you had nothing to do with. I'm sure you don't want anybody to take it out on you, but yet we do with our children. Get in a relationship. You're in a relationship with someone, married or not. See how you will feel if the person you're in a relationship begins to not have the patience, not have the time, not have the emotional bandwidth, not have the attention span to give you and nurture you. How will you feel? How long would you withstand that? And how long would it take for you to leave that situation? You would call that unhealthy, neglectful, and sometimes when we're hurt and we take things out because we're frustrated, now you're being abusive. You're not going to speak that way to me. That's disrespectful. You're not so and so and so and so. But yet we do that with our children on a regular basis. Now, I'm a firm parent, always been firm. And I believe that we do need to be firm. There do need to be structure, standards. There absolutely has to be consequences to teach us about our behavior, about ourselves. But there's a specific way of going about it. We have to be intentional in the things that we do. Am I going to yell at my children? I learned and eventually got to the point where I will not ever raise my voice at my children. Even if at a time I become loud, it's not because I'm yelling at them, it's because I'm gaining their attention. There's a big difference. I have my own view of how parenting from ego affects children and what it does. I also wanted to look it up. I just had to look it up. So I said, okay, I looked it up, found it. I'm going to read it to you, what it says on Google, and then I'm going to tell you my version, what I gather from learning about the dynamics of parenting from ego. So looking it up, it says ego parenting is a self-centered approach where a parent's need for control, validation, where parents need for control and validation. Now, as I'm saying this, it may be difficult if you're watching. I want you to be honest with yourself and see if this applies to you. Doesn't mean that you're a bad parent, just means that you can be a better parent or you're making some mistakes that you can change. And if the time has passed and they're older, still doesn't mean you can't change. And so that you could have just a better and positive experience with your children, with yourself, the whole 9 yards. But I want you to listen to this and see if it applies to you. Ego parenting is a self centered approach where a parent's need for control, validation, or to maintain a certain image takes precedence over the child's emotional needs. That's the first sentence. I looked at it for myself, and I can relate and admit to all of this. I had to maintain control of my household. In fact, as a man, he controls his household. He has control over his household. Everything that goes on in the household, it reflects the man. That's the image also. If you want to see what a man how a man is, look at his family. Look at his household. That's the image. That's why a lot of people run around, post pictures on Facebook, and in public, they try to act like they're the best and healthiest and happiest family when it's far from the truth. But we got to keep that image up. That's why we don't air our dirty laundry because we don't want to look bad. We got to keep that image up. That's why we will yell and shout because we got to maintain control. Oh no, there's no anarchy in it. You're not going to tell me. Respect is one thing, control is another. Validation. We all want to know that we're doing a good job. And I guess one way of knowing that we're doing a good job is when our children listen to us, even if the ask is unreasonable and ridiculous and sometimes oppressive. Continued reading. Driven by a desire to feel right or successful, this style involves overprotecting, micromanaging, or forcing children to fulfill the parents' unmet desires. The amount of people that became parents because they wanted to feel love and they figured children give unconditional love, so I'm going to have a child so I can feel love. Pure selfishness. That's where that comes from, about fulfilling a person's self need. That's not good because when children behave like children naturally and normally, it may not fit into the box that we want it to fit into. We become upset. We become discouraged, disappointed. We become a litany of unhealthy, unpleasant things, and it comes out invariably on the children. And now we've created damage. They say examples of this includes the focus on self. The parent views the child's behavior or achievement as a reflection of their own worth. Control and authority, a strong need to dictate the child's life, often leading to power struggles. Emotional reactivity, taking the child's behavior personally, leading to big and over the top reactions. Huge. Pushing children into activities for the parent's pride, rigid rules, shaming, or excessive worry about appearances. That's huge. It's so prevalent. Again, focus on self. The parents' views the child's behavior children's as a reflection of their own worth. Strong need to dictate the child's life, often leading to power struggles. Taking a child's behavior personally, leading to big over the top reactions. Pushing children into activities for the parents' roles, rigid rules, shaming, or excessive worry about appearances. I'm trying to keep this podcast from being too long, but I can easily go into all of these and give you examples of where I was for each one. Our middle son, my current wife and I's oldest son, my middle son, it seemed like he was destined to be an attorney at that. He participated in mock trial. He got first place every time he participated. He won a prize of meeting the Chief Justice here in Atlanta. He was doing so, except when you see him perform, you would swear that it was a real trial. You would think he thought it was a real trial. In fact, in one of the competitions, the judge had to say, okay, this is not real because because of how he was. My father-in-law was not just an attorney, but he was a chief justice, a chief magistrate. He developed the law school for the Caribbean. He's from Guyana. He was the head of the law department in Guyana. So we're thinking law is in his blood. Woo! He's going to go for it. Went to school. Before he got to school, he was helping out. He would help out his friends with their academics because he was academic. My wife and I pushed it. And then even while in college, he started teaching as his on-campus job, and he was excellent at it. And he was also in the finances. He wound up creating a curriculum out of nowhere. And for his senior year, that was one of his side jobs. He actually taught a finance class his senior year. That was a credited class. And next thing you know, upon graduation, he told my wife and I he changed his major from law to education. And that's what he's been doing ever since. I say that to say because at first it was a hard pill to swallow. We were like, what are you doing? And it was easier for me to let go. My wife, it took a little longer. She did. And I reminded her, I said, baby, you're an educator. I've been an educator for 30 years, 25 years, 30 years. You've been an educator for 10 years. I said, of course he's going to be in education. Yeah, we thought he would have gone to law, but we forget what we are. I'm not in law. My wife is not in law. I'm in medicine. My wife is a nurse, and we're both educators. So for him to go to education, be an educator, why did he do so well in all those mock trials? We taught him whatever you do, do your best. Do your best possible. So that's what he did. But that's not where his passion was. So we had to let that go. We had to let him lead his own life and in any of the choices that they do, that he wants to do. I'm not going to get heavy into examples for each because I'll be here for over an hour. But let me share with you what I realize, what happens when we parent from ego. I believe and I realize that when we parent from ego, that we're imposing trauma and confusion upon our children. How do we do that? When we parent from ego, we're teaching our children not to have a voice. When we tell them that children should be seen and not heard. When we tell them to be quiet. When we tell them what they say doesn't matter. We're teaching our children not to have a voice instead of teaching our children how to express themselves. Our children should be able to express how they feel and how they think, and we should teach them how to do it. We should teach our children how to have a voice. They should be heard. Everyone should be heard and seen. And now the whole thing about being seen, being heard. And yet, as children, why are we fighting this fight now? Because as children, we were taught not to be heard. And truthfully, a lot of times, they didn't want to be seen either. But we were taught how to hide, not to be seen. Teaching from ego teaches our children to repress and dishonor their feelings and themselves. Because we tell them, hush up, your feelings don't matter. But dad, but mom, this is how I feel. It doesn't matter how you feel. Don't tell me. I don't want to hear it. So in addition to teaching them how not to have a voice, we also teach them to suppress their feelings because they do. I remember my mother, after getting in trouble, fix your face, fix your face, fix your face. You better not cry. I'm upset. I'm hurting. Regardless, right or wrong, this is how I feel. And you're telling me to suppress my feelings because you don't want to see it, because you don't want to deal with it. You don't have the patience to deal with my feelings. You don't have the patience to teach me how to deal with my feelings and what to do with my feelings. So you are basically teaching me to become a powder keg because at some point I am going to explode one way or the other. So we teach them to respect, dishonor their feelings and themselves instead of teaching them emotional intelligence, from young and self understanding. However, way we feel as a child, it is a parent's duty to teach us to explore these feelings and to understand what they mean, why we feel the way we feel. And then from there, we can teach children how to be, how to manage those feelings, and what to do in respect of those feelings instead of ignoring those feelings. We teach children when we parent from ego how to become selfish and self absorbed instead of teaching empathy and compassion. Because no matter what we say, children are going to do what we do. And if we are so selfish, and if it's all about what we want and how we feel, your child is going to do the same thing. It's going to be about them and their feelings. Nobody can ignore their feeling but for so long. And eventually your feeling's going to scream. It's all it's going to be. It is about you. Because that's what happens as adults. And us adults, we become parents. And it is about our feelings. So when we're in a conversation and somebody is saying something, instead of understanding why they're feeling the way they're feeling and how that relates to me and what I'm doing. All I care about is how I'm feeling, what I got to say. I don't care what you got to say. I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, and this is this and that's that, and that's it. That's selfish. There's no, there is no, there's no desire to seek understanding. As adults, after being traumatized, being told to keep quiet, and that our feelings don't matter. As adults, all we want to do is be heard. So I don't care how you think and how you feel. All I want to be is heard. I don't care how you understand because I'm more concerned about you feeling and understanding how I feel. And that's a selfish, unfortunately, position. We teach children how to survive instead of teaching children strategic thinking. That's what happens. Children are going to have their feelings, so they learn to survive. And some of the ways in which they survive is lie, cheat, deceive. They We do what's necessary as children to survive in the environment that we're in instead of strategically thinking. We're not taught how to approach. We're not taught what to say, how to say what we need to say. We're not taught how to handle a situation that we don't like. We're not taught how to anything because what we're forced to do is to keep quiet, suppress our feelings, and stay out of sight a lot of times. We're teaching children avoidance instead of conflict resolution. We're teaching children to avoid because that's what we do. In that scenario with Mr. Gabor, with the interviewer that was molested at
from ego. I used to jokingly daydream of being one of those fathers that when my daughter started dating and bring home a guy, I toss him out the window. I call Do the Banks from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, always throwing Jeff out the window, out the door. I said, I'm going to be Mr. Banks when you bring home these knucklehead boyfriends. And the funny thing is that whenever my daughter would talk about some interest boy, I would get all bent out of shape. And one day my daughter said, Dad, if this is going to be your reaction every time I tell you something, then all I'm going to do is just not tell you, and you won't ever know. She was bold enough to tell me that. I was thankful too, because I said, oh, shoot, if I don't know, what can I do? How can I ever help? How can I ever advise? How can I ever guide anything? How can I ever intervene if I don't know? So that was a tough pill to swallow, but I swallowed it because I want to know, because I want my daughter to come to me with every and anything. And I learned to create that space. I learned to create a safe space that even when my children aren't at their best, that they feel safe, they can come to me and I won't overreact. What does that mean? Your ego says, who are you to talk to me this way? You're not supposed to talk to me. I'm your parent. I'm the authority. You're supposed to give me this respect. This is how you're supposed to be. That's what the ego says. So if you come at me the wrong way, then we got issues. But the problem with that is that as parents, we're never perfect. We make mistakes. So if me as a parent can make a mistake, if me as an adult can sometimes not behave the best, then why would I expect the child to be better than me? I'm asking a child, when I say that, I'm saying, be perfect. Oh, no, you're not going to be perfect. I'm not going to expect the perfection. So I started changing how I would do things. So if any of my children came at me the wrong way, as long as it wasn't egregious, and it never is, because they have a respect for me, but they may be expressing something they don't like with a level of passion because of whatever feelings they have, I will listen, let them express themselves. I will address the issue, and then depending on your level of disrespect, if it reached that or how you were, then we'll address that. But to my surprise, I didn't even need to address that because they would self-correct because of how I was, because I created such a safe space that I'd never lost respect. I gained more respect from them, that I didn't even have to self-correct. A lot of times, I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have spoke to you that way. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Yeah, you were. But I understood you was upset. But okay, I'm going to give you that. Okay. I'm not going to do it again. Yeah, I know. Yes, you will. At some point, it just won't be frequent. But you might lose yourself at some point. You might have a tude. And if you have a tude, you have a tude. Everybody has a tude. I got a tude when I'm ready. They know when I'm sleepy. They know exactly they know when I'm sleepy or very hungry because I'm not the best. I'm not Prince Charming at that time. My third son experienced that. My wife and I were very strict. No video games during the year. Nothing. That's it. Only during summer or during your winter break. But no video games, only schoolwork. So here it is, straight A student, 4.0. And he's doing exceptionally well, 11th grade. And he came to me one day, he said, Dad, it's a weekend. Can I play a game on the weekend? And I said, no. Nope, you know I roll. He got so upset. A few minutes later, he was like, Dad, that's not right. I am a straight A student. I've been so and so and so. I've done this. He went down the list. Mind you, his tone was not the best. I think he kind of gave up being respectful and felt that he was going to get in big trouble. So he just said all what he had to say with the tone he said it. Yeah, Dad, blah, 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 and that's not right, and I'm not fit. And so I just listened. And when he was done, I said, you know, son, you made some valid points. You really did. He had gotten a scholarship too. He had gotten a scholarship at the end of 10th grade that he already started reaping the benefits for in 11th grade. So he mentioned all of that too. And I still, not even one, but I still can. And after he said all the way he said with the two that he did, his siblings was there and I was standing in front of him. And he looked like he was ready. I said, you know what, son? You made some valid points. What do you mean, Dad? What do you mean? I said, yeah, nah, you made some good points. Everything I heard, all of what you said. Nah, Dad, come on, don't do that to me. I said, what are you talking about? Don't do what? Dad, I was disrespectful. My tone was bad, Dad. No, that's not right. That's not right. I said, son, you made some real valid points. And I went over the points. And I said, you know, I'm going to think about it because you're right. You're right. You've learned the lessons and the values that we wanted to teach you. You're right. You know, he started crying because he felt so bad how he spoke to me. And that's because I wasn't ego tripping. I didn't trip about how he was, what he said, and all of that. I'm authority, how you speak to me, and so forth. He had some very strong feelings that he needed to express. His need was to be heard and seen for all his accomplishments and hard work. So I made sure he felt heard and seen. And in feeling heard, he heard himself. And he heard how he was with me. So I didn't have to say anything. He just felt bad. He was like, oh, Dad, no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, nah. Later on, I said, okay, this weekend you can play some games. And he asked why I was the way that I was. How come? I said, you had some valid things. Well, the way I said it was wrong. I said, yes, it was wrong. But that's not what was the most important thing. And in saying that and doing that, I made him feel valued. So I made sure he felt seen, heard, and valued. Even when my big son was telling me the things that I did, what I did, and how traumatic it was from how it hurt him, I listened. I didn't get defensive. I apologized. I said, you were right. You're right. I said I was so sorry. I didn't know how much that you, but I didn't give any reason. I didn't explain anything. I didn't. He didn't need to know. It wasn't his business, nor his fault what situation I was in. He didn't create it. So I wasn't going to burn him with that. I wasn't going to try to do a reverse psychology on him, try to get him to feel guilty for being upset because I was in a bad financial situation. That wasn't his fault, his responsibility, nor his problem. He was already, unfortunately, dealing with the burden of the hurt that was caused because I wasn't present. I wasn't there for him. He felt he already wasn't living with me. But if he could spend even just an hour or two with me at the airport, that was valuable to him. An hour or two. And I couldn't even give him that. But I didn't ego trip. I listened. And he felt heard. And ever since, our relationship has been on a rise. So what do I say to you? What do I want you to walk away with? I want you to walk away with the wanting, the desire to give your children the best that I know you want them to have. And in order for you to give them the best, you have to look at you and look at you completely, fully, honestly, so that you can become your best. That also means look at areas that need to be healed. I didn't get heavy into healing yet, but I will on the next podcast. I'm going to talk about healing so that we could be better parents and what that looks like and how trauma affects us, especially as parents. But for this one, start with letting go of that ego, relinquishing that pride. Pride is the very first sin and the first entity to commit the sin of pride was Lucifer, according to the Bible. Let go of that pride. Relinquish, defeat the ego within you. You're not taking anything away from you. You're not losing anything. If anything, you'll gain. And if you're anything like me or how I used to be, also don't judge yourself. My kids, oh, Dad, you did what you do. I was like, that's an excuse. Irrelevant. But as my therapist, Candace Prescott, always say, I can't use certain words. If she was listening to this and she heard me use the word should, I'd be in trouble, because she says we don't use should, we don't use woulda or coulda. You can't change the past. We got to focus on what we can do now. So, I hope this video has helped you. I hope you can benefit from it. I hope your children, your family benefit from it. And I look forward to seeing you, or you seeing me, on the next podcast. Again, thank you. Welcome to Choose Wisely, and have a great day.